Hare Krishna devotees, Hare Krishna. We are now, this is now day 6, and we are in the 4th chapter of the 4th canto. It's the story of Daksha, the conflict between Daksha and Lord Shiva, and eventually Daksha, through his offenses, gets severely punished. Okay, so we're in the 4th chapter then, which is titled Sati Quits Her Body. Oh, it is truly dramatic. However, first of all though, let us chant our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharne Niravishesha Shunyavadi Paschachade Shatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha. Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, devotees, here we are, chapter 4 of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4 in our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar. Chapter 4 is titled Sati Quits Her Body. And we've divided it into 5 sections as follows. First section, verse 1 to verse 3, Sati leaves for the yajna. Sati leaves for the yajna, verse 1 to verse 3. Then second section, verse 4 to verse 10, Sati and her followers arrive at the yajna. Verse 4 to verse 10, Sati and her followers arrive at the yajna. Then very dramatic section, oh gosh, number 3 from verse 11 to verse 27, in anger, Sati quits her body. 11 to 27, in anger, Sati quits her body. Then section 4, verse 28 to verse 30, people conjecture why Sati gave up her body. 28 to 30, people conjecture why Sati gave up her body. And finally, the 5th section, verse 31 to verse 34, confrontation at the yajna. 31 to 34, confrontation at the yajna. So these are the sections. First section is verse 1 to verse 3. Sati leaves for the yajna. So it's just 3 verses. We won't read the, we'll just go through it all one time. We won't read the verses and then come back and go through it again. Okay, so verse 1. The sage Maitreya said, Lord Shiva was silent after speaking to Sati, seeing her between decisions. Sati was very much anxious to see her relatives at her father's house, but at the same time, she was afraid of Lord Shiva's warning. Her mind unsettled, she moved in and out of the room as a swing moves this way and that. Okay, so we do have a very short purport 2 sentences. So she didn't know whether to obey Lord Shiva or to go. She didn't know. So there was a great struggle going on within her that Prabhupada says the struggle was so great she was pushed from one side of the room to the other. So she moved like the pendulum of a clock, if you know what that means, what that's like, just back and forth and back and forth. Verse 2, Sati felt very sorry at being forbidden to go see her relatives at her father's house, and due to affection for them, tears fell from her eyes. Shaking and very much afflicted, she looked at her uncommon husband, Lord Shiva, as if she were going to blast him with her vision. So there is actually a purport here. I mean, it's not a big purport, but shortish. Let's just go through. So in the verse, there's this word, apratipurusham, which means one who has no equal. One who has no equal. So that's Lord Shiva. He's got no equal in the material world. In regard to equality towards everyone. In other words, he is more equal towards everyone than anyone else in the material world. And Sati knows that. So if that's the case, Prabhupada raises the point, why was he being unkind to his wife and not letting her go to her father's place? So this distressed her more than she could tolerate. So she looked at him as, well, the verse said, as if she was going to blast him with her vision. So in other words, Prabhupada makes the point, this is a very interesting point. Since Lord Shiva is Atma, Atma means generally soul or the person, but Prabhupada says Shiva also means Atma. So it's indicated here that Sati was ready to commit suicide. So then Prabhupada gives another meaning for the word apratipurusha, the personality who has no rival. And again, that's Lord Shiva. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, since Lord Shiva could not be persuaded to give her permission, Sati took shelter of a woman's last weapon, weeping, which forces a husband to agree to the proposal of his wife. Verse 3, thereafter Sati left her husband, Lord Shiva, who had given her half his body due to affection. Breathing very heavily because of anger and bereavement, she went to the house of her father. This less intelligent act was due to her being a weak woman. Now, that's quite something, isn't it? Due to her being, by her womanly nature, it says, agat straina vimudha. She went deluded by her womanly nature. That's what the Sanskrit says. So, okay, there's a purport here. Vedic conception, and it's common actually. Husband gives half his body to his wife, and the wife gives half her body to the husband. Yes. In other words, husband without wife or wife without husband is incomplete. So they were married by Vedic standards, but sometimes, due to weakness, a woman, even though she's married and settled in her husband's place, the wife may become attracted towards the father's family again. This is what happened to Sati. So here it's stated she wanted to leave her great husband because of womanly weakness. Prabhupada makes a very interesting point. Some of you ladies might not appreciate this, but Prabhupada says, generally separation between husband and wife is due to womanly behavior. Divorce takes place due to womanly weakness. So I don't know what the figures are, the statistics, but anyway, that's Srimad Bhagavatam for you. So the best course for a woman is to follow the orders of the husband. This makes family life very peaceful. Otherwise, sometimes there may be misunderstandings between husband and wife, like here. But the wife, even if that's the case, the wife should never leave the husband's protection because of that. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, if she does so, it is understood to be due to womanly weakness. So, let us have a look here. This is the second section of chapter 4 of the 4th canto, from verse 4 to verse 10, which we've titled Sati and her followers arrive at the yajna. So let's read through the verses, just so we get the flow of things and how everything fits together here. Right, so first of all, verse 4. When they saw Sati leaving alone very rapidly, thousands of Lord Shiva's disciples, headed by Maniman and Madha, quickly followed her with his bull Nandi in front and accompanied by the yakshas. Verse 5. The disciples of Lord Shiva arranged for Sati to be seated on the back of a bull and gave her the bird which was her pet. They bore a lotus flower, a mirror, and all such paraphernalia for her enjoyment, and covered her with a great canopy. Followed by a singing party with drums, conch shells and bugles, the entire procession was as pompous as a royal parade. Verse 6, she then reached her father's house, where the sacrifice was being performed, and entered the arena where everyone was chanting the Vedic hymns. The great sages, Brahmins, and demigods were all assembled there, and there were many sacrificial animals, as well as pots made of clay, wood, iron, gold, grass, and skin, which were all requisite for the sacrifice. Verse 7. When Sati with her followers reached the arena, because all the people assembled were afraid of Daksha, none of them received her well. No one welcomed her but her mother and sisters, who, with tears in their eyes and with glad faces, welcomed her and talked with her very pleasingly. Verse 8. Although she was received by her sisters and mother, she did not reply to their words of reception. And although she was offered a seat and presents, she did not accept anything, for her father neither talked with her nor welcomed her by asking about her welfare. Verse 9, present in the arena of sacrifice, Sati saw that there were no oblations for her husband, Lord Shiva. Next, she realized that not only had her father failed to invite Lord Shiva, but when he saw Lord Shiva's exalted wife, Daksha did not receive her either. Thus she became greatly angry, so much so that she looked at her father as if she were going to burn him with her eyes. Verse 10, the followers of Lord Shiva, the ghosts, were ready to injure or kill Daksha, but Sati stopped them by her order. She was very angry and sorrowful, and in that mood she began to condemn the process of sacrificial fruitive activities and persons who are very proud of such unnecessary and troublesome sacrifices. She especially condemned her father, speaking against him in the presence of all. So, okay, devotees, now we're going to go through the second section, verse 4 to verse 10, in detail, verses and purports. Section titled, Sati and her followers arrive at the yajna. Verse 4, when they saw Sati leaving alone very rapidly, thousands of Lord Shiva's disciples, headed by Maniman and Madha, quickly followed her with his bull Nandi in front and accompanied by the yakshas. Okay, so let's have a look at the purport here, which is just short. Prabhupada says, she was going so fast that Shiva might not have been able to stop her practically. And Prabhupada refers to the words, last couple of words in the verse, Gati Vyata, means without fear. She didn't care that she was going alone, so she was practically fearless. And then there's the word anuchara. It's also significant. It indicates that Shiva's disciples could understand his desire. He didn't want her to go alone. So Prabhupada then says, anuchara means those who can immediately understand the purpose of their master. Sure, that's deep, isn't it? Those who can immediately understand the purpose of their master. Verse 5. The disciples of Lord Shiva arranged for Sati to be seated on the back of a bull and gave her the bird which was her pet. They bore a lotus flower, a mirror, and all such paraphernalia for her enjoyment, and covered her with a great canopy. Followed by a singing party with drums, conchos, and bugles, the entire procession was as pompous as a royal parade. So verse 5 has no purport. We go on to verse 6. She then reached her father's house, where the sacrifice was being performed, and entered the arena where everyone was chanting the Vedic hymns. The great sages, Brahmins, and demigods were all assembled there, and there were many sacrificial animals, as well as pots made of clay, wood, iron, gold, grass, and skin, which were all requisite for the sacrifice. Okay, so there's a fairly extensive purport here. Let's go through 2 paragraphs. So, first point Prabhupada makes is, when sages, Brahmins, gather to chant Vedic hymns, some also have debates. about Shastra. Yeah. So some of the sages and Brahmins were doing that. Some were chanting hymns. So the atmosphere was surcharged with transcendental sound vibration. So that's fine. But nowadays, Prabhupada makes the point that nowadays, this transcendental sound vibration, which in days gone by, because this is such a yuga, it would have been the chanting of mantras, debating about Shastra, and like that, these different sound vibrations mixing together. Now, the ideal situation is that the Hare Krishna mantra just be chanted. That's enough. That's more than enough. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, yeah, it's Kali Yuga. So we can't expect anyone to be elevated or educated in Vedic ways of understanding, because Kali Yuga means people are very slow, lazy, and unfortunate. So anyway, therefore, Lord Chaitanya, in regards to sacrifice, he just recommended chanting Hare Krishna. And Bhagavatam 11.5.32 also recommends Yagyai Sankirtana Prayir Yajantihi Sumedasa. This is what everyone should do. You want to have a big religious performance, some sort of sacrifice, do Sankirtan Yagya. Yeah. And don't bother with all these complex, sophisticated processes. Sophisticated processes, too sophisticated. Plus now, because of poverty, you can't even get all the different things you need for those traditional fire yagyas. Plus there's a lack of knowledge regarding the mantras, the procedures and everything, but particularly the mantras. So therefore, for this age, people should just gather and chant Hare Krishna to satisfy the Lord, who's with his associates. This indicates glorifying Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, Advaita Acharya, etc. That's how to do yagya now. So now there's a second paragraph. Prabhupada makes the point that it's a significant point that there were animals there for sacrifice. But Prabhupada explains it doesn't mean they're just going to be killed. They were there just to test the realizations of those who were doing the sacrifices. So an old animal was offered in the fire and then rejuvenated. Young animal would come out the other side. That was the test of the mantra, the mantras. Yeah. So the animals were not killed and eaten. Purpose of sacrifice was not to replace slaughterhouses, but test the mantras by giving the animal or animals new life. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, animals were used to test the power of Vedic mantras, not for meat. Verse 7. When Sati with her followers reached the arena, because all the people assembled were afraid of Daksha, none of them received her well. No one welcomed her but her mother and sisters, who with tears in their eyes and with glad faces welcomed her and talked with her very pleasingly. So, okay, yes, well that's nice. Her mother and her sisters didn't follow the others by ignoring her. They immediately embraced her with tears and loving feelings. And Prabhupada makes an important point. This shows that women as a class are very soft-hearted. Their natural affection and love cannot be checked by artificial means. And we see it. I mean, I've seen it many times. Very soft-hearted. So the men there, they were learned Brahmins and demigods, but they were afraid of Daksha. So they didn't want to do anything which would upset him, which he might not approve of. So they knew if they just welcomed Sati, it would displease Daksha. They wanted to welcome her, but they could not do that. So Srila Prabhupada concludes this purport of verse 7 by saying, women are naturally soft-hearted, but men are sometimes very hard-hearted. Krishna, Krishna. Verse 8. Although she was received by her sisters and mother, she did not reply to their words of reception. And although she was offered a seat and presents, she did not accept anything, for her father neither talked with her nor welcomed her by asking about her welfare. Okay. Right, so again there's a short purport to verse 8. So Sati did not respond. She didn't respond to the welcome from her mother and her sisters because she wasn't satisfied by Daksha's silence. She was his youngest child, and she knew she was his pet, but now because of her association with Lord Shiva, Daksha just forgot his affection for her, and this really disturbed her. So the material bodily conception is so polluted, even a slight provocation can nullify a whole relationship of love and affection, or even all of our relationships of love and affection, just a slight provocation. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, bodily relationships are so transient that even though one is affectionate towards someone in a bodily relationship, a slight provocation terminates this intimacy. Okay, so verse 9. Present in the arena of sacrifice, Sati saw that there were no oblations for her husband, Lord Shiva. Next, she realized that not only had her father failed to invite Lord Shiva, but when he saw Lord Shiva's exalted wife, means Sati herself, of course, so Daksha did not receive her either. Thus she became greatly angry, so much so that she looked at her father as if she were going to burn him with her eyes. Okay, let's have a look at the purport. It's a sort of short-ish purport here. And Prabhupada begins by explaining that when we offer oblations in the fire, offering oblations would generally mean like offering ghee, swaha, that's the offering of oblations. So Prabhupada says, by offering oblations in the fire while chanting swaha, one is offering respects to all the demigods, great sages, pitas, etc., and particularly Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and Lord Vishnu. So it's just normal that in such situation that Lord Shiva is offered respects with the others, as we just mentioned. But so Sati was listening to hear his mantra, Namaha Shivaya Swaha, but she didn't hear his mantra. Sounds like she heard Lord Vishnu's mantra. Sounds like she heard Lord Brahma's mantra. She was listening for Lord Shiva's mantra, but she didn't hear Lord Shiva's mantra. And this is disturbing for her. It's extremely disturbing. So Prabhupada mentioned she wasn't sorry for herself because she was ready to come uninvited, but she wanted to see, is my husband being respected? In other words, the relationship between Sati and Lord Shiva as husband and wife is very, very deep, very deep. And even Prabhupada says that seeing her mother, her sisters, and other relatives and friends, not so important. Yeah, she didn't really worry about that. But what she was concerned about is my husband being insulted here? So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, when she marked the insult, she became greatly angry, and she looked at her father so angrily that Daksha appeared to burn in her vision. Verse 10. The followers of Lord Shiva, the ghosts, were ready to injure or kill Daksha, but Sati stopped them by her order. She was very angry and sorrowful, and in that mood she began to condemn the process of sacrificial fruitive activities and persons who are very proud of such unnecessary and troublesome sacrifices. She especially condemned her father, speaking against him in the presence of all. Okay, so right, let's have a look at the purport here. That Vedic sacrifice, it's especially to satisfy Vishnu. In all Vedic yajnas, no matter who is the main deity they're trying to get some mercy from, but in every case, Lord Vishnu is really the central figure, even more so than whoever. Like if it's a Saraswati puja, if it's an Indra puja, if it's a Shiva puja, Vishnu is the main deity actually. Yes, because as Bhagavad Gita 5:29 says, Bhoktaram yagya tapasam, Lord Krishna, Lord Vishnu, is the enjoyer of all sacrifices and austerities. But anyway, still less intelligent people, they offer sacrifices for material benefit, and that's what Daksha and his followers were doing. They were trying to get material benefit. So it's all condemned as a labor of love with no profit. Bhagavatam confirms this. You know, in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, the sages in Naimisharanya, headed by Shonaka Rishi, they were doing a great 1,000-year sacrifice at the beginning of Kali Yuga to try to offset the the development, the degraded development of Kali Yuga, to slow it down at least. So it's material. And Sutta Goswami came on the scene, and Shonaka Rishi told him that, we're doing this sacrifice, we're trying to slow down the starting of Kali Yuga. It's a big fire sacrifice, but it doesn't seem that we're getting any result. And then he said, this is Shonaka Rishi, the head of the sages, he says, actually we are getting a result. The result is, the only result we're getting is our faces are becoming blackened by the smoke. Other than that, there's no result. So as Prabhupada says, it may be a labor of love, but it's a useless labor with no profit. And Bhagavatam confirms this. And because in the end, after you've done, you can do as many sacrifices as you like or as you're able. But if through those sacrifices you don't develop an attraction for Lord Vishnu, Lord Krishna, it's all useless labor. And anyone who's developed love for Vishnu or Krishna must develop love and respect for Vishnu's devotees. And Lord Shiva, of course, is the most prominent devotee of Lord Vishnu. Vaishnavanam yata shambhu. That's a line from a verse in the last chapter of the 12th canto, the last chapter of the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, that just as the Ganges is the greatest river, just as Lord Achyuta or Lord Krishna is the supreme deity, so Vaishnavanam yata shambhu. So Lord Shiva is the greatest Vaishnav or devotee of Lord Vishnu. So, therefore, Sati, when she saw her father, is doing this whole sacrifice with no respect for the greatest devotee, Lord Shiva. She was angry. And Prabhupada makes the point in the purport, it's a really important point actually, that it is quite fitting that she became angry. And we shouldn't think that, she's just getting angry like it's a material phenomenon. It's very Krishna conscious. And Prabhupada makes the point that when Lord Vishnu or a devotee of Lord Vishnu is insulted, one should become angry. You should become angry. If you don't, if you just say, well, we'll tolerate, that is offensive, actually. So, and Prabhupada gives a very nice example. Lord Chaitanya was always very meek and humble and, Trinadapi Sunichenar, etc. But when Lord Nityananda was attacked by Jagai and Madai, he was going to kill them. Destroy them, not just kill them, but just devastate them. So, Srila Prabhupada refers to Srila Narottam Das Thakur, Krodha Bhakta Dveshi Jane. Prabhupada says, we have anger, and that anger can be a great quality when directed against a person who is envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his devotee. So therefore those offenses against the Lord, against his devotees, should not be tolerated. Just in that regard, a little story that Giriraj Maharaj told me, experience with Prabhupada. Giriraj Maharaj was temple president in Mumbai, in Juhu. Prabhupada, at that particular moment was traveling elsewhere. And one day the telephone broke down. They couldn't make any calls or receive any calls. Couple of days, 2 or 3 days, few days later, Srila Prabhupada came. And Srila Prabhupada said to Giriraj Maharaj that I need to make a phone call. Where's the telephone? And Giriraj Maharaj said, Srila Prabhupada, the phone is broken, it's not working, we can't use it. And Srila Prabhupada said, well, what are you doing about it? And Giriraj Maharaj said, Srila Prabhupada, we are tolerating it. And Prabhupada said to him, no, we must not tolerate it. We need it for our service to the Lord. So they got the phone put on. Right, yes, so these offenses against the Lord or his devotees should not be tolerated. So therefore Sati's anger towards her father was not, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not, Prabhupada says, it was not objectionable. Because even though he was her father, still he was insulting the greatest Vaishnav, and that, we cannot tolerate that insulting greatest Vaishnav. So Prabhupada says that thus Sati's anger against her father was applaudable. She should be congratulated for that. Okay, devotees, so now we go on to section 3, verse 11 to verse 27, titled, In Anger, Sati Quits Her Body. So you remember when we went through the previous section, the last verse, verse 10, said that she condemned her father and she spoke against him in the presence of everyone there. That was verse 10. So now we're going to read through from verse 11 to verse 27, just initially just the verses. And verse 11, well, that's the first one, isn't it? There's a few in which she now will chastise her father, Daksha, in the presence of everyone. Verse 11. The Blessed Goddess said, Lord Shiva is the most beloved of all living entities. He has no rival. No one is very dear to him, and no one is his enemy. No one but you could be envious of such a universal being who is free from all enmity. Verse 12. Twice born Daksha, this is Sati chastising him. Twice born Daksha, a man like you can simply find fault in the qualities of others. Lord Shiva, however, not only finds no faults with others' qualities, but if someone has a little good quality, he magnifies it greatly. Unfortunately, you have found fault with such a great soul. That's amazing, isn't it? Gee. Verse 13. It is not wonderful for persons who have accepted the transient material body as the self to engage always in deriding great souls. Such envy on the part of materialistic persons is very good, because that is the way they fall down. They are diminished by the dust of the feet of great personalities. Verse 14. Sati continued, My dear father, you are committing the greatest offense by envying Lord Shiva, whose very name, consisting of 2 syllables, Shi and Va, purifies one of all sinful activities. His order is never neglected. Lord Shiva is always pure, and no one but you envies him. Verse 15. You are envious of Lord Shiva, who is the friend of all living entities within the three worlds. For the common man, he fulfills all desires, and because of their engagement in thinking of his lotus feet, he also blesses higher personalities who are seeking after Brahmananda, transcendental bliss. 16. So this is still Sati. Do you think that greater, more respectable personalities than you, such as Lord Brahma, do not know this inauspicious person who goes under the name Lord Shiva? He associates with the demons in the crematorium. His locks of hair are scattered all over his body. He is garlanded with human skulls and smeared with ashes from the crematorium. But in spite of all these inauspicious qualities, great personalities like Brahma honor him by accepting the flowers offered to his lotus feet and placing them with great respect on their heads. Verse 17. Sati continued, if one hears an irresponsible person blaspheme the master and controller of religion, one should block his ears and go away if unable to punish him. But if one is able to kill, then one should by force cut out the blasphemer's tongue and kill the offender. And after that, one should give up his own life. Wow, this is amazing. Verse 18, therefore, I shall no longer bear this unworthy body which has been received from you, who have blasphemed Lord Shiva. If someone has taken food which is poisonous, the best treatment is to vomit. Verse 19, it is better to execute one's own occupational duty than to criticize others. Elevated transcendentalists may sometimes forego the rules and regulations of the Vedas, since they do not need to follow them, just as the demigods travel in space, whereas ordinary men travel on the surface of the earth. Verse 20, in the Vedas there are directions for two kinds of activities. Activities for those who are attached to material enjoyment, and activities for those who are materially detached. In consideration of these two kinds of activities, there are two kinds of people who have different symptoms. If one wants to see two kinds of activities in one person, that is contradictory. But both kinds of activities may be neglected by a person who is transcendentally situated. 21. My dear Father, the opulence we possess is impossible for either you or your flatterers to imagine. For persons who engage in fruitive activities by performing great sacrifices are concerned with satisfying their bodily necessities by eating foodstuff offered as a sacrifice. We can exhibit our opulences simply by desiring to do so. This can be achieved only by great personalities who are renounced, self-realized souls. 22. You are an offender at the lotus feet of Lord Shiva, and unfortunately, I have a body produced from yours. I'm very much ashamed of our bodily relationship, and I condemn myself because my body is contaminated by a relationship with a person who is an offender at the lotus feet of the greatest personality. 23. Because of our family relationship, when Lord Shiva addresses me as Dakshayani, I at once become morose, and my jolliness and my smile at once disappear. I feel very much sorry that my body, which is just like a bag, has been produced by you. I shall therefore give it up. Verse 24, Maitreya, the sage, told Vidura, O annihilator of enemies, while thus speaking to her father in the arena of sacrifice, Sati sat down on the ground and faced north. Dressed in saffron garments, she sanctified herself with water and closed her eyes to absorb herself in the process of mystic yoga. Verse 25. First of all, she sat in the required sitting posture, and then she carried the life ear upwards and placed it in the position of equilibrium near the navel. Then she raised her life ear, mixed with intelligence, to the heart, and then gradually towards the pulmonary passage, and from there to between her eyebrows. 26. Thus, in order to give up her body, which had been so respectfully and affectionately seated on the lap of Lord Shiva, who is worshipped by great sages and saints, Sati, due to anger towards her father, began to meditate on the fiery air within the body. 27. Sati concentrated all her meditation on the holy lotus feet of her husband, Lord Shiva, who is the supreme spiritual master of all the world. Thus she became completely cleansed of all taints of sin and quit her body in a blazing fire by meditation on the fiery elements. Okay, devotees, let us finish here. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.